So Dr. Gottman, he came up with four main indicators that I'll share with you today of how to know if your marriage is heading towards divorce. And these are really good indicators, a lot of good research to back this up. And so let's go through these four together today. And now some of these aren't going to be anything new. You've heard me talk about them before, but I think in the context of evaluating our marriage right now, how is it? What does it look like? And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most successful, one being near divorce, where would you rate your marriage? I'm going to start with the first one, which is criticism. Now, criticism can be incredibly destructive. I mean, there's a lot of negativity that comes with criticism, and it literally can tear a marriage apart. So, one of the main skills of a healthy marriage and of um, partners in a marriage is being able to talk through issues and to be able to disagree on things and to respectively discuss them out until coming to a conclusion or determination on what to do. And sometimes there may not be a conclusion. Sometimes just acknowledging that both of you have a different viewpoint on this particular issue. And it's okay. Some of the best people I know in my life, and I think of some of my grandparents. My grandparents had a really great marriage. But I know that there was times where they disagreed because as a child, I remember being a third party witness to some of their disagreements. But they did it very respectfully, and sometimes there was some intensity in their conversations, but they always resolved it and they had respect for each other and they moved on. So I think that's a really important skill. So criticism can look like a lot of different things, but one of the things that's most destructive that Dr. Gottman talks about is when you're attacking the other person's personality or you're attacking their character. And that can be incredibly destructive in a marriage. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, what if my spouse does have really terrible character? What if my spouse really does have a personality problem? What if what if their personality is really hard to deal with? And granted, that may certainly be the case. There may be some truth to that, right? But the wisdom here is not to criticize your spouse for their personality or character. Rather, you talk through those issues in a very respectful way. We could spend a whole episode just talking about how to do that, and we'll do that in another episode. But that's the first one, criticism. Beware of criticism. So if there's a lot of criticism going on in your marriage, especially in regards to attacking personality and then also character, you can know that your marriage is probably not where it needs to be and maybe heading towards divorce. Okay, so let's move on to the second one. So number two is contempt. So that's a great word, contempt. What is contempt? So contempt can be insulting or demeaning your spouse. Insulting or demeaning your spouse. So you either indicate through words or actions. It may be facial expressions. It may be body language. You are thinking of the other person as being stupid, incompetent, a fool, someone who's disgusting. If you're emanating that type of feeling or contempt towards your spouse, they're not going to want to be around you very long, right? And they may develop similar feelings towards you as well. So this is another very strong indicator. So this is number two, contempt from Dr. John Gottman. If you're experiencing a lot of that in your marriage, you may be heading towards divorce. That's another great indicator. We're going to go to number three, which is defensiveness. Now, what do we mean by that? When you're responding defensively to complaints or criticism or contempt by making excuses, denying, arguing, whining, or counter blaming, rather than trying to solve problems. That's what we mean by defensiveness. I think one that's huge is making excuses. I think as adults, and our children do this fairly often, right? We kind of have to train them away from it. We can make excuses for our bad behavior, our poor behavior, and sometimes there may be some legitimate reasons for that poor behavior. And we should be forgiving towards one another if that's the case. But oftentimes our excuses are just that. They're just excuses and they neither justify us nor help us. And so if you're being very defensive every time you talk with your spouse, if that's coming across in your attitude and your verbiage and in your body language, You need to be very careful of that because your divorce may be imminent. It may be heading your way. If that's something that's a very strong component of your marriage, and in your communication with your spouse. Another one that I think is huge on defensiveness, we talked about excuses, can just be whining. A lot of times we have a tendency to whine or to complain, and that's not healthy. If we're murmuring, complaining, whining, that really is a form of defensiveness where we're trying to protect ourselves or protect our position or trying to be right, even when we know we are right, or even when we know we're wrong. Either way, always coming across that way can be very destructive. We need to be in a situation where we are open and we can communicate freely and we can talk about issues without being defensive. That's a really important skill. Okay, so we're moving on to number 4. We just got done talking about number 3, defensiveness, and now number 4, stonewalling. But this is where you're withdrawing physically from your spouse, and you're withholding yourself from your spouse. You're not talking to them. You're not sharing your eye contact, or your actual physical affection may be lacking with your spouse. Those are all can all be indicators. So anytime you're withdrawing emotionally or physically from your spouse, that's stonewalling. So if you have a disagreement, for example, and your spouse wants things done a certain way and you're angry that they want it done that certain way, and so instead of just continuing to talk about it, you withdraw from it and you just don't say anything to your spouse. You don't talk to them, you leave them out of things, you don't acknowledge them when you walk by. That's stonewalling. So very common behavior if you're heading towards a divorce in your marriage. So those are the 4. So I'm just going to review them here real quick. So we have criticism, we have contempt, we have defensiveness, and stonewalling. So if those 4 are prevalent in your marriage, or any one of them are prevalent in your marriage to a high degree, it's very likely that you're heading towards divorce. And so now's the time to kind of evaluate that, to stop and say, okay, this is present in my marriage, and I can change myself. I can change my behaviors. Now, Dr. John Gottman, he talks about these 4 things as being the negatives. Now, also talks about what we call a 5-to-1 ratio. So this 5-to-1 ratio is saying for every 1 negative interaction, you should have 5 positive interactions. So the 5-to-1 ratio, I'll repeat it one more time. So for every 5 positive interactions, you should only have 1 negative interaction. If that is the case, it is very, very likely that your marriage is stable and is in a very good place. If you're much higher than that, on the negative side, your marriage is in danger of being unstable and eventually maybe heading towards divorce. So you need to be very careful of that. You have to keep communication channels open. If you don't, then criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling are going to creep in, and they're going to be a big part of your marriage, and they will lead to the destruction of your marriage if you're not careful. They will lead to divorce. So those things need to be cleaned up and pushed out of your marriage. And if you will do that, you will be able to bulletproof your marriage.